Tell me how you describe yourself.
I would describe myself as a playwright, independent playwright. That's pretty much how that's pretty much what I've always wanted to do in theater. Most people start out wanting to be actors, but when I first seriously encountered theater in high school, I knew that this is really what I want to do. I want to put words in people's mouths, and that's what I've been doing, what I've been trying to do ever since. Initially, I wanted to write dark comedy and satire. I've always had a bit of a twisted sense of humor and kind of an eye for the absurd, both in our interpersonal relationships and in politics as well. So I started out wanting to kind of just capture that and call attention to things that people might otherwise ignore. And to some extent, that's still true, although I think my focus has shifted a little bit in recent years.
Tell me about that in the context of divide and rule. What are you holding the magnifying glass up to?
I'm trying to hold the magnifying glass up to the way people view perpetrators of crimes who just so happen to be people of color. One of the reasons that the main character of the play, Lasanta, is so determined to root out Rishan's wrongdoings is essentially so that by going after people like Rishan, Lasanta will basically be able to walk through life saying, he won't have to sort of worry about being lumped in with people like Rishan, people who perpetrate any sort of horrific crime, whether it's terrorism, whether it's sexual assault, anything that's morally and ethically wrong. So it's essentially it's essentially trying to call attention to how racism affects the way that we walk through the world on a very personal level, because I've sort of found that the first thing I think when I hear about a crime that was committed by a brown person is, I don't want to be lumped in with this person. I don't want to be thought of as exactly the same as this kind of person. So the play is it grew out of an attempt to examine that response and go why was that the first thing that came to my head? So that's sort of that's really the main intention with the piece, which I discovered much later on when I actually finished it.
Interesting. Okay, so tell me a bit about your process using divide and rule as an example.
Okay, well, my process really, with that play specifically, began with an image. It began with, very specifically, the image of these two brown men standing back to back with their fingers raised up like guns like this, and slowly kind of pacing away from each other in a kind of mock duel. And that image was it was just so striking to me. I immediately wondered who these men were, what their beef was with each other, and why there was such animosity between them. And I'd been working in a thrift shop at the time, the same kind of thrift shop where the play takes place, and I had come into contact with so many people who were very much like me, people who were students, who had come to Canada from India or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. They were using this job as a way to kind of pay their way through college, university. There were older immigrants from these countries who had been working at this thrift shop for the better part of their lives, and I was surrounded by these people, and I had talked to these people, and without realizing it, I had absorbed a lot. I had absorbed a lot of content from that experience, and so it all kind of came out in that play. But the seed of it was the image of these two men, and I started with that, and I wrote along with the play to kind of discover where it was all going, and to discover what I really wanted to say.
So playwriting for you is sort of a discovery rather than
Absolutely.
like a construction or a creation.
Yeah, it begins as a kind of discovery of kind of following your subconscious. I always think that the first draft is both the most fun part of the process, and it's the scariest part of the process, because all you have before you is a blank page, and you're just kind of writing to get to the end, to just sort of get everything out there. And it's the most kind of raw and vulnerable part of the whole deal. And then once you have that first draft, you can rewrite, you can edit, and that's where you kind of decide what the play is trying to say, and you gain some power over this thing, and you can mold it and shape it to kind of fit what you think you need to express. But yeah, it always begins as a process of discovery, and to me that's what makes it so that's what helps to make a play very kind of alive and dynamic.
What's so interesting to me is how strongly your identity figures in your work. Has that changed over time, or has it? Yeah.
It's definitely become more apparent to me that that this is a part of myself that I want to explore and express in my work. I didn't start out that way. I always kind of, I was initially very resistant to that idea, because, when you're already marginalized, and when you're already kind of implicitly told that your stories are not a part of the cultural narrative because you're not seen as the kind of quote unquote default human, even though there are, a myriad of different ways of being human. I had to ask myself, do I want to willingly, voluntarily put myself into a box of that kind? But then all of that kind of changed when I started writing Divide and Rule. I found the idiom of my coworkers. I found the idiom of my parents that I'd heard growing up, and it, far from being constraining, I actually ended up finding it quite liberating in delving into the specifics of that human experience. And so I thought, okay, maybe this is the trajectory on which I'm sort of meant to go as a playwright. We'll see how that, and I'm excited to see how that evolves too, as I get more experience and more ideas.
What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness? A vast, unending library in which I can work. The kind that Borges would have written about.
What is your favorite piece of writing?
My favorite piece of writing is the novel Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, because it taught me what the true purpose of art is, which is to try and speak to as many people as you can across cultural borders.
What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear? Dying before I get to complete my life's work.
Which living person do you most admire?
My parents, for everything they've done, the life that they managed to make for themselves here.
What performance is most memorable to you?
Performance that was most memorable to me, I would say, was the Centaur Theatre's production of Scorched by Wajdi Mouawad. I saw that when I was fresh out of high school, and that just reaffirmed my desire to be a playwright.
What is your motto?
My motto? Obey your own muse, always.